you for everyone showing up. I'm Jane Bruner, President of Oakland City Council, and joining me is Dan Lindheim, City Administrator. And we're really going to just answer questions mostly today, but I'm going to start with saying how thrilled we are that Measure BB passed. It was this last budget process that we adopted the budget in June was very difficult. As you know, we had, if you take out debt, police and fire make up 85% of our general fund, leaving us only $28 million. It was very difficult for the city council to lay off 80 police officers, and we had no desire to lay off any more. If the fact that BB passes, it does two very good things. First of all, we will not have to lay off any more police officers. So we will not be laying off the 122 police officers that we would have to have done if BB did not pass. And secondly, it brings back the problem-solving officers into the neighborhood so that we can actually try to put back community policing, or really do community policing, because I'm not sure we ever really done it in the city the way it's supposed to be done. So we're want to thank Oaklanders because they, once again, are smart. They understood it. They said they don't want to contribute money. They're not opening their pocketbooks, but they understood the difference between opening up their pocketbooks for different measures that cost money to fixing Measure Y so that we could actually get the money back from Measure Y taxes and continue the prevention programs and not lay any more officers off. So I'm going to hand this over to Dan Lindheim to give a little detail, and then we'll open it to questions.
So first of all, in terms of BB, it's important to recognize the hard work that the police union, the fire union, Local 21, SEIU did in support of it, especially to recognize the hard work that a lot of community organizations did in support of the measure. One of the magical things that takes place is council will put something on the ballot, and then somehow a campaign is supposed to take place, but no one's allowed to participate in the campaign. So it's really when the community steps up that the campaigns take place, and it was just very good contribution on the part of the city unions and the community groups. Regarding the number of police, you have to watch two different sets of numbers. One is layoffs, and I agree with Jane that we probably won't have to have additional layoffs. That means existing officers who will get pink slips. The other number is how many officers do we have? So when we balanced the budget in June, the assumption was if all measures failed, we would lay off another 122 police officers in addition to the 80, which would have brought us down to a force level or number of officers of 574 officers. With the passage of BB, which funds 63 officers, that takes us to 637. We currently are at about 671. The question is, how do you close that difference between 671 and 637, knowing that there is attrition of roughly 5 officers per month, and also knowing that there'll be substantial amount of attrition at the end of the year. So our assumption is that we're going to be close, plus or minus, to the funded level of the 637 sometime during 10-11, and then it's a question of how do you manage how many officers you currently have plus the attrition, and then to maintain the level that we have funding for. So it's important to understand that as great as the passage of Measure BB was, there's essentially no general fund funding in Measure BB. And the measures that didn't pass, Measure X and Measure W, which did have general fund funding, didn't pass. So we're in a situation where we're able to not have to lay off additional officers, but we don't have any additional funds in the general fund to balance the budget or to bring back officers or to increase the force level of the number of officers. So it's just important to understand whether we're talking about the number of officers, the number of layoffs, and these are different kinds of issues. But the very good news is that existing officers, there probably will be no additional existing officers who will be laid off. And then because of attrition, pretty soon, at some point, we're either going to have academies or bring back some of the officers who have been laid off in the past in order to maintain the level of officers that we currently have funds for. So that's introductory statement.
Question. Don Parada, in his kickoff, said that his first action is going to be to reinstate the 80 police positions. What's your response? And you might have to work for him, too.
I'll take that one.
Cool.
We know there's not money in general fund, because there's only 28 million left. So I have had conversations with Parada about where else you could look for money in the system, and it's probably the other funds. It's redevelopment. Somebody's gonna have to be very creative. I don't know if he has a detailed plan at this point, but I don't think you can come in and find $14 million out of 28 million. You maybe could find a few million. So, but we're willing to, you know, we're all gonna sit down right away. We don't know, and also we're being presumptuous because they haven't called who the election is. So I wanna be a little careful.
I was looking for that. Go ahead.
What?
I was looking for that. Go ahead.
And say whoever it is. But, you know, the other two people have had council experience and gone through the budget. So if it's Parada, but they all were saying the money's there. So they have to really figure it out. There were some ideas that were on the table earlier that didn't get accepted. One of them that I really was pushing for is using some redevelopment money for police in redevelopment areas. Having redevelopment pay for some debt that I think, like the Kaiser Center and the Convention Center. I'm sure that every candidate has other ideas that they have spent some time on. But we're open to, like, whatever anyone has a really good, creative idea, we will work with it and see if it's doable. Because there's no, you know, every time we do this, and we've done this now for 3 years, we find something new every time.
Real quick, if you use redevelopment funds under section 33678 subdivision B, you have to rewrite the redevelopment plans. You guys can do that quickly?
The redevelopment issue is very complex. Basically, under redevelopment law, you can't fund existing services and then use redevelopment money to supplant. If you do something new, if you do something incremental, you do something special, then you can do that. So it wouldn't require rewriting of the plan, but you would have to fit those basic constraints if a new mayor's plan is to use redevelopment funds. The arithmetic basically is police cost 6 per million in round numbers. So if you're going to bring back 80, you're talking round numbers, $13 million plus or minus. Nobody wanted to lay off the officers back in June. The council, administration, scrubbed the books. I think it's going to be difficult to find that money. Maybe there are new arrangements. Clearly, there's the possibility of contributions by the OPOA to pension, but that's relatively limited because even if the OPOA gave all 9% in the short term, that's only $7 million, so that's only half of that 13.
Right.
So there are constraints. Are there other pots of money? I don't know what they are. If a new mayor knows what those are, that's going to be fantastic news to the city and fantastic news to the officers and to the OPD, who feels like they are desperately understaffed. And it's something that we absolutely agree with.
Oh, okay. Can you break the math down for me? You have been saying that there could potentially be as many as 120 layoffs next year. B gives you about half of those. BB gives you about half of those, right? So now you're saying you're not expecting to have to lay off more officers. Where are you getting the money for those
Attrition.
remaining?
No, it's because of attrition. That's why I'm saying you have
It's
to
only
watch.
27.
Well, no, it's more than that.
It's 5 a month is what I was told.
Well, but it's not, that's on average. But basically at the moment, we currently today have funding for 696 based on the budget resolution. We're not supposed to lay off beyond 696.
That funding lasts you how long?
Through December.
fiscal year.
Through December. Then the 122 was below the 696. So you take the 696, you lose the 122, you're at 574. You bring back 63, you're at 637. Okay? We're currently at 671. We have funding for 637. We've got to close that delta. But with additional attrition, that delta is going to be closed very quickly. So from a management point of view, you don't want to lay off all of those officers and then have to go back and hire them back one by one. I mean, from a management point of view, that makes a little sense. So we're going to have to figure out how to smooth that, and not only smooth it between now and reaching that level, but also how to avoid going below that level. Because the only way we're going to do that is either by having new academies or by bringing officers back.
So the 696 is authorized is now. There's
The
funding-
696.
Funding now, but
okay.
as of January 1st, the funding goes down to 637, is what you're saying. Right now.
With the passage of Measure BB.
Okay, so, but right now in the budget, there's funding for 696 officers, but as of
Through
January.
the end of the year.
Okay, so, but as of January 1st, with the passage of Measure BB, there's funding for 637.
That's correct.
Okay, so the 63 problem-solving officers that would be restored with passage of Measure BB, those, because those officers were shifted over to patrol when this all happened, when the layoffs happened, are those officers, there's not gonna be additional hires, right? Those officers are gonna be shifted from the existing force back over to the community policing role?
Okay, you have to be careful about positions and officers and numbers. So the answer is the people who will be filling those 63 positions are existing officers. So conceptually, you need to think about it that we're going from, we are losing the 122, and then we're bringing back the 63, just conceptually. So essentially, we're avoiding laying off additional people. But those 63 are going to be transferred from existing positions, which puts an additional burden on the police department because those are occupied positions.
Right.
So if people are now going to be in PSO positions, they're not going to be either in patrol or office positions. So there will have to be backfill of patrol, and then we'll have to figure out how to staff the office positions that we don't have staff for.
So I guess, Jane, you're trying to put a good face on this, that yay, Measure BB passed, and isn't that wonderful, we're not gonna have to lay off more officers, when in fact, the outlook is pretty grim, because we're gonna have fewer officers next year than we do now, even if there's no more layoffs, correct?
Fewer patrol.
Fewer patrol officers.
Well, I don't know if we're going to have fewer patrol officers, because I think the chief is insistent about staffing patrol at a close to the full level.
But if we only have funding for 637 officers, and we currently have 671, how is that a better, how does that
Well, the
look better
question
for the
to
city?
ask
Well, compared
is
to
what
what?
number are on patrol? How many are on patrol?
Well, the two issues.
Very
One is
low.
compared to what? The compared to, the euphoria is we're not going to go down to 574. That's the euphoria. And we're also going to have people in problem-solving positions. And we're going to have the other Measure BB funds for violence prevention and for fire. So that's what the euphoria is. The reality is, yeah, we're going to have, we didn't, no money, no general fund money was passed in this election. And that's another reality. And we were hoping to have some general fund money passed, and had it been passed, that we could have used those funds to build back up the force. But at the moment, we don't have funds to do that.
So, but to ask the question another way, I mean, the current level of staffing, whatever, 671, I was told 673, that's not gonna go up. I mean, if you're a citizen of Oakland, you can't say, yeah, we're great, we're now gonna have, the staffing's gonna increase, unless somehow the new mayor finds some level of funding. The staffing's not gonna go up.
The reason why the council put this clearly unpopular Measure X on the ballot was to provide funding for fully staffing the 803 previously authorized staffing level for police officers. Would have brought back the 80 who had been laid off, and it would have fully staffed the police department at the 803 level. That's why it was important to The reason why it was expensive is because that's what it would have cost. The voters and some of the people running for office either didn't understand that or weren't willing to ask for more or pay for greater taxes. But ultimately, it doesn't come from, money has to exist. And unless the money's gonna come from somewhere, it doesn't exist. And you can't pay for officers unless you have the money. Okay.
So, a couple questions. So the baseline figure seems to have changed, right? In June, the baseline for officers was 803. And after the layoffs, did the baseline become 776?
No, the 803, here's the arithmetic, it's all very simple. 803 less 80 live bodies, which is what council laid off, plus the 27 vacancies that existed at that moment. So we were at 776, there was authorized 803, we were at 776, we lost 80, puts us at 696. So that's been constant.
Okay, but then the